We start with a point. Like the point we know from geometry, it has no size, no dimension. It's just an imaginary idea that indicates a position in a system. A second point, then, can be used to indicate a different position.
The presentation, beautiful. Simple, clean, gold and a green, amazing. And then
But it, too, is of indeterminate size. To create the first dimension, all we need is a line passing through any 2 points. A first-dimensional object has length only, no width or depth. If we now take our first-dimensional line and draw a second line cross...
On this one, I really tasted the rose notes. You're presenting us with a work of art, really well done.
It's a very nice presentation, and like you said, Lionel, I was surprised by the rose flavor. Of course, the texture of the marshmallow is all very soft, so it's good that you put some opaline on top.
Sing the first, we've entered the second dimension. The object we're representing.
The next round, you banked 16 minutes and 20 seconds. We wish you the best of luck.
Presenting now exists within a plane that has length and width, but no depth. Way back in 1884, a fellow named Edwin Abbott wrote a book about a race of two-dimensional creatures called Flatlanders. Whether the...
Praveen and Ashley, tell us what you made.
Hello, judges. We made candied rose petals with free of strawberry and lychee, and then we also made the rose-flavored sugar dome. The chocolate is a dark chocolate to balance the sweetness.
I like the fact that you put a dome, you like glass, very thin. It's very interesting. The flavor, I got the note of the flower, everything plus.
These imaginary creatures could really exist or not. They're useful for thinking about what it would be like to live in a flat, two-dimensional world. If we were to watch a balloon passing through the Flatlanders' world, for instance, it would start as a tiny dot, become a hollow circle which inexplicably grows to a certain size, then shrinks back to a dot before popping out of existence. But what would the Flatlander actually see? Imagining the extremely limited viewpoint of a creature confined within this 2D plane gets even stranger than that. Now let's move to the third dimension. This should be the easiest for us because every moment of our lives, that's what we're in. A three-dimensional object has length, width, and depth. But here's another way to...
3 teams make it into the final sugar sculpture round. Who had your favorite candy?
Mathieu and Andreas hibiscus candy blew me away. It's a work of art, beautiful work.
It almost look like a mini showpiece.
they really matched the flavor of
to describe the third dimension. If we imagine an ant walking across a newspaper which is lying on a table, we can pretend that the ant is a Flatlander, walking along in a flat, two-dimensional newspaper world. If that paper is now folded in the middle, we create a way for our Flatlander ant to magically disappear from one position in this two-dimensional world and be instantly transported to another. We can imagine that we did this by taking a two-dimensional object and folding it through the dimension above, which is our third dimension. It'll be more useful for us as we begin to imagine the extra dimensions if we can think of the third dimension in this way. The third dimension is what you fold through to jump from one point to another in the dimension below. To be clear, no matter what dimension you are folding, it provides a way to move instantaneously from one distant position to another. A wormhole is the scientific term for this concept. Now let's look at the fourth dimension. Just like any other spatial dimension,
This is so hard because they're all so good.
Okay, just it sounds like a decision has been made. I will let our sugar artist know. Sugar artist, can I have your attention, please? You all did an excellent job giving us a massive sweet tooth today. Unfortunately, every rose has its thorn, and the team with our judges' least favorite candy today is Chad and Joey. So incredibly sorry. It was an unbelievable candy, just remarkably tough competition. The time in the Sugar High Kitchen. As of now.
Thank you.
I feel that I didn't farther down.
It's okay. We'll still remain friends. We'll move on.
19 minutes and 20 seconds. Mathieu, Andrea, you banked 37 minutes and 59 seconds. We're gonna add 3 hours to that. Mathieu and Andrea, you banked the most time, so you're starting first. And that time starts in 3, 2, 1. Good luck. Lionel and Jean-Marc.
Simultaneously from one dimension, it's made up of 2 opposing directions. But we 3D creatures only experience this dimension in one of those directions. Why is that? It's because you and I are made out of 3D atoms and molecules, and we derive our energy from chemical reactions which move in one direction only. But science shows us that time's reverse direction is just as valid, and in fact, the standard definition of antimatter is that it's matter which is moving backwards in time. So rather than saying the 4th dimension is time, let's use the word duration. If you were to imagine your body's duration as a shape in the 4th dimension, you could think of it as a long undulating snake with your embryonic self at one end and your deceased self at the other. But because we're to imagine your body's duration as
Alone is a challenge because sugar is very similar to glass. It can be very challenging to try to keep it all in balance. So the first thing we're doing is
Oh, I have a
putting down
snakes.
our sugar batches to cook. Most importantly is our sugar for our
a shape is that it's matter which is to imagine your body's duration as a shape in the 4th dimension. You could think of it as a long undulating snake with your embryonic self at one end and your deceased self at the other. But because our reality is observed one quantum frame after another from the 3rd dimension, we are like our second deceased self. If we're to imagine your body's duration as a shape in the 4th dimension, you could think of it as a long undulating snake with your embryonic self at one end and your deceased self at the other. But because our reality is observed one quantum frame after another from the 3rd dimension, we are like our second dimensional flatlanders. Just like that flatlander who could only see cross-sections of objects from the dimension above, we as 3-dimensional creatures can only see cross-sections of our 4th dimensional self. And just as you and I require the 4th dimension to change from state to state, think about how for a 2D flatlander, time would be one of the 2 possible directions in the 3rd spatial dimension. Quantum mechanics tells us that the particles that make up our world are derived from waves of probability simply by the act of observation. It is for this reason that I like to refer to the 5th dimension as our probability space. And this relates very nicely to a theory which is now gaining acceptance. Advanced in 1957 by Hugh Everett III, his theory is commonly known as the many worlds interpretation of quantum mechanics. It was Everett who showed us that these parallel outcomes reside within a space which is orthogonal to space-time, and the versions of the universe that we don't observe are just as real as the ones we do. What's orthogonal or at right angles to space-time? With this project, this leads us to the conclusion that Everett's many worlds reside within the 5th dimension. One of the most intriguing aspects of this approach to visualizing each new dimension as being orthogonal to the previous one is that it means we can be observing one dimension and be unaware of our motion in an additional one. Here's a simple example. If we make a Mobius strip, take a long strip of paper, add one twist to it and tape the ends together and draw. Draw a line down the length of it. Our line will eventually be on both sides of the paper before it meets back with itself. It appears, somewhat amazingly, that the strip has only one side, so it must be a representation of a 2-dimensional line. It means that a 2-dimensional flatlander traveling down the line we just drew would end up back where they started without ever feeling like they had left the 2nd dimension. In reality, they would be looping and twisting in the 3rd dimension, even though to them, it felt like they were traveling in a straight line. The 4th dimension feels like a straight line to us, moving from the past to the future.
Hello,
with
please?
what's called the arrow of time.
Please.
But that arrow is, without us even being aware of it, actually twisting and turning in the dimension above. So the long undulating snake that is us at any particular moment will feel like it is moving in a straight line in the 4th dimension, but there will actually be, in the 5th dimension, a multitude of paths that we can branch to at any given moment. Those branches will be influenced by our own choice, chance, and the actions of others. We move through those branches one Planck frame at a time, and this is why some physicists say that the fifth dimension is curled up at the Planck length, because from our reference frame, that's how it appears. It's important to note, though, that Everett was also very clear that causality could not be violated, as we
I said milk.
So right
I
now,
can't shout because I
there's zero
wouldn't
probability
breathe. I
that you or
cannot
I can suddenly
breathe.
be in the world where, for instance, Michael Jackson is still alive. And
No,
yet the
I
many
cannot
books
breathe when I
interpretation
shout, so
says
just give me
those
milk.
versions of the universe really exist within the quantum wave function. So how could we get there? We would need to code our 5D probability space through the sixth dimension. I like to call the sixth dimension our universe's phase space. Why? A phase space is defined as a space in which all possible states of a system
Matuto niya.
Motivations up. So I believe in 20 minutes, all of this should be done.
So cooking the isomalt is our biggest struggle. This is delaying
System are
including casting and pulling. That brings us a lot of concern to finish the piece.
So as soon as you guys want to reach, just let me know. I'm gonna help you with the colors. And you wanna go with the base, I'm gonna go with the chips, yeah?
Sounds like a plan.
Holy moly. It's frustrating.
Ba't may nagmamando?
Hindi, things.
Now I start with the sugar rose.
Okay.
The floral aspect of this is very classic when you're doing sugar work. It's one of the first things that you learn, and if you would agree with me, Stefan, any chef that specializes in this, you're learning how to do a rose.
They're just works of art that take a lot of precision to create.
I learned the sugar work for 35 years ago. The first flower I tried to build, it was the rose.
I've been, watching my dad doing competitions all my childhood, I always had this dream of doing something with him. I'm just next to him watching him doing the roses and I'm just like, no way, you just did that in 10 minutes. Like,
Anong mais ng buhay
presented
natin?
with each possible state of the system corresponding to one unique point in the phase space. So those points representing the versions of our universe where Michael Jackson is still alive are inaccessible to us from our current position within the fifth dimension, but they still exist within our sixth dimensional phase space. Now, as we enter the seventh dimension, we're about to imagine a line which treats our
Pag tumigas yan, wala na.
Now we're ready to start to do some pruning for the flowers.
our entire sixth dimensional phase space as if it were a single point. You could say that this point represents what Einstein was thinking about when he said the separation between past, present, and future is only an illusion. Some would call this point infinity for our universe. All wrapped up as one single, timeless everything. So if we intend to draw a seventh dimensional line that passes through this point, we need to be able to imagine what a different point in the seventh dimension is going to be, because that's what our line needs to pass through. But how can there be anything more than infinity? The answer is there can be other completely different infinities, other different everythings, created through initial conditions, and the resulting branching timelines from that universe's beginning to all of its possible endings will create a phase space of all possible states different than the phase space associated with our own universe. Think about this. What if the 7D line we just drew represented all possible universes with different values for gravity, with our universe someplace on that line? Lower gravity than ours would be in one direction, and higher gravity in the other. Would that line be a way to get to every possible universe? No. In order to represent other universes with the same value for gravity as ours, but with other basic physical constants changed, we need to branch off to the possibilities contained within the eighth dimensional phase space of all possible physical realities. And this would be true no matter what variables we were adjusting within the seventh dimensional line. We would still need the additional degree of freedom afforded by the eighth dimension to get to every possible physical universe. Now, how do we get to the ninth dimension? The same logical rules we've been using would apply. If we were to instantaneously jump from one eighth dimensional point to
just keep leaning backward and still moving. Just gonna put another hard sphere
Without passing through the intermediate points, it would be because we were able to fold through the ninth dimension.
Girls are on their way, they're getting there.
Andrew was taking vodka and silver powder to dab the bottom of the flower to reflect the light.
We're using different molds to get all kinds of different shapes and components for our structures. When you bring in these power tools,
Dimension.
things you find a hardware store.
Within this approach to visualizing the dimensions, then, the ninth spatial dimension is beyond any physical reality and is much more about information, a seething foam of possibilities which could represent impossible universes which exist only as concepts, or selection patterns which could be the beginning of a path toward a universe such as ours or any other. And to complete the logic we have used from the outset, we now take the entire ninth dimension and conceive of it as a single point. But this is where we hit a roadblock. If we're going to imagine the 10th dimension as continuing the cycle,
Few minutes in the fridge can help, but it's risky because the cold can crack the sugar. We are not willing to take that risk. We definitely have no time to make any more pieces, so I'm just trying to put together whatever I can to make a small
and being a line, then we're going to have to imagine a different point that we can draw that line to. But it can't be done. By the time we've imagined an ultimate ensemble of every conceivable information pattern as a single point of indeterminate size, there's no place left to go. M-theory says that our reality is defined from 10 spatial dimensions plus time. And that's what we're talking about here, a 10th dimension without time. As soon as anything tries to happen within the 10th dimension, we are spilled back into the dimensions below, as subsets are carved out from this ultimate ensemble, this omniverse, this timeless and unchanging everything which underlies our reality or any other. And that is a beautiful and fascinating idea for us all to ponder. I hope my project, Imagining the 10th Dimension, a new way of thinking about time and space, has given you some valuable food for thought, and that this will be the beginning of your exploration into understanding the underlying structures of our reality that the great scientists of our day are introducing us to. It's important to note that this project has reached millions of people around the world because it also can be related to many other belief systems, and not just mainstream science. I've created many other videos as part of this exploration of the wide-reaching implications.
Minutes remaining.
I gotta finish it.
There is a shortage of 500,000 machine learning and artificial intelligence professionals. Keeping this in mind, the University of Texas at Austin brings you a comprehensive course in artificial intelligence and machine learning. This course is designed for working professionals who are looking to transition their careers into artificial intelligence and machine learning, with a unique mentor learning experience and career assistance from industry experts.
28 September 2018. Yo kid, I am going to pass you. But I have a gun. Left unknown becomes first. 12 March 2019. Hey, left unknown, I can pass you well. You know what happened to Kid Arrive? Yeah, but I have a fractal power and it is more powerful than a gun. Okay, so let's battle. Oh, forgot to mention, this Mandelbrot is an extremely powerful sword and shield. FUK, I am going to die. Now I am first. Yes. And one left unknown and one Chica were harmed in the making of this video.
Are you? Pangit naman. Kasi yung bulak-bulak. Wala eh.
Hi, Praveen. Hi, Ashley. You guys went through the ringer on that last round, didn't you?
So,
28 September 2018. Yo kid, I am going to pass you. But I have a gun. Left unknown becomes first. 12 March 2019. Hey, left unknown.
inches. So unfortunately, we needed that to be 36 inches, 3 feet tall. Your still incredible sugar sculpture is no longer eligible to win.
Disappointment. At least you're glad that you just stop working or give up.
Beth, tingnan mo.
Just because of one failure, and I'm excited to see what the future brings.
Beth. Sugar.
You, Andrea, you are taller than 36 inches right now.
Since for the first round we went a little more elegant, for the second round we wanted to do something a little more foreign. We created our own flower. Even the back of the petals, we put detail, even though it's not really showing to anyone, but that's how much detail we fully thought that through. So every bit of it, when you're looking around, is finished. Just exquisite.
It's pretty
This feels like it does. Just a really beautiful piece of work. You gave us Vegas, baby. Like that's the whole time I was like, these are Vegas people. So it was really spectacular.
Thank you. We have one more team to check out, so thank you. Thank you.
Beth.
Mark, you were wondering what this was going to look like.
Can you give me milk, please?
Yes, wait, I will just finish this. Look all sugar. It's
My
all
lab did all
sugar.
the crude sugar work concerning the roses, all the leaves and the petals, we did some roses.
It's a piece of modern art, you guys, that you can just eat.
It's a nice shape, it's a plastic shape, but it's pretty nice, pretty elegant, abstract. The ribbon, the leaves, bubble sugar on the side, the bouquet of flower on top with the 3 roses, and I know that this takes time to do, and it's well done, well executed.
I can tell it's French. The bubble, to the ribbon, to the little twirls. I mean, it is super plain, which I love.
We'd love to see you measure it. You just edged it out. Jean-Marc, what was it like working with your son today?
Naiyak. Naiyak si Papa.
Bakit?
Magkama pala yun
It's okay.
Bakit siya naiyak?
That's enough of a response.
eh. Nagawa siya sa ano niya, gawa niya.
We made a good team.
Yeah, you're a great team.
Yeah, you know what, whatever happens later today, we are proud of what we were able to put on the table. It's his last competition and I wanted to do it.
Really?
I wanted to do it
last
together,
competition
so we
na.
can enjoy time.
Dad's taught you very well.
Our judges only have one thing left to do, and that's decide which team is going to win Sugar High today. So judges, let's head back to the judges' table. Thank you.
Nanalo yan. Yung green.
Your sugar sculptures were incredible. The only thing left to do is decide who had our judges'
Did you get so many?
sculpture. Jackie.
You know, Jean-Marc, your piece was so beautifully done, and I love the deconstructed hearts. And the
It's taking a million years.
that relationship was really transmitted into your work today. Thank you. And Andrea, you guys as well, your science. Jean-Marc and Leah.
Jean-Marc and Leonel, that's one vote for you. Meaning you get one vote today, we'll win Sugar High, and go home with $10,000. Come on.
I was really impressed by the original showpiece. Not only the size, but the shape, which is not very common. Lionel, Jean-Marc, you did a very technical showpiece, flower, leaves, the planets,
one, please.
Wait lang, nakuha mo na lang.
You and Andrea. That's one vote.
Aww.
This next vote will decide.
I'm thirsty. I'm even melting.
Finish na, oh.
Colors were great, and I appreciated how many incorporate with Andrea, and two, you went above and beyond the height requirements, which showed a lot of risk. Elements and elevated it to another degree that I haven't seen before. So, that being
And I'm proud of the work we've accomplished together. We had a chance to learn partnership together.
Ay, be. Pa-charge niyo itong water. Ano mga paglagay ba? Charge ko yung ayaw ko na. Kratos, you said you want milk. Niluluto niya yung ano niya, tenga niya. Ano ba? Weird daw.
Birthday ba ni Mark? November 6, di ba? November 6, di ba? August ba yan? Ang birthday ba niya?
Kiss muna. Kiss muna. Ay, yummy. Yummy. I said yummy. I said yummy. Sarap. Ganun ka ba eh.
Paroplexian. Paroplex. Duh.